Okay, we'll start now. A warm welcome to our masters, Hualien Dharma team, and brothers and sisters around the globe for Saturday Hualien Dharma Talk. A very good morning. Let us start the session for today. This morning, I would like to share teachings from Master, walking the Bodhisattva path with concrete religion. Time can accomplish everything. You and I have the great opportunity to be together on a path, which is the Bodhisattva path. We are not here to seek self-enlightenment. We have made the great vow to walk the Bodhisattva path. Bodhisattva must have a base in this world. Ching abode is based on Bodhisattva. The monastic disciples are strongly grounded. Everyone practices with concrete religion. For Master's teaching. Now let us send our sincere prayers into the 10 directions. May the Sahaland be free from disaster and peace prevails in the world. Let us sing the prayer song with sincere piety.
In my heart, I feel deep gratefulness. All my heart is filled with sincere prayer. From all corners of the world, let us join our hearts and pray for a world of harmony and peace. From my heart, I pray. May we join our hands, our hearts as one. Spread the seeds of great love, nurture wisdom evermore. Let us fill the world with hope. In my heart, I feel deep gratefulness. May all the Buddhas know my prayer. All united with one heart, let us end our hate with love. May there be no suffering hereafter.
May all minds be purified. May there be peace in the community. May there be no disasters in this world. Now let us together pray for universal love and blessing. With loving respect, gratitude, and confidence, let us wish every person in our lives a healthy body, an enlightened mind, and a total fulfillment in universal love. Now let us expand this consciousness to include every person in the world, every being in the universe. Let our unified love make this wonderful world even better. Let us all immerse ourselves in the joyful embrace of universal love. Before we hear the wonderful sharing, let us invite our masters to lead us in paying homage to the triple gems. Let us pay our respects for these teachings and explanations to the Buddha and Master Ching by making 3 sincere bows. Please rise, palms together. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. And a bow to our beloved Abode Masters who could join us today. Welcome everyone. Okay, today we have Mr. Shu who will be sharing on the nonviolent communication part, and followed by Brother Johan. I will be sharing on the Sustainable Development Goals. Now let us invite Sister Ching for the weekly summary. Yeah, Sister Ching, over to you. Confirm.
I haven't unmuted. Morning, this is long. Okay. Last week we had Sister Joyce. Sister Joyce embarked on a journey profound when a lobster encounter turned her world around. For a charity event, she had to take part, but killing those lobsters weighed heavy on her heart. The cries echoed within. She could hear their plea. From that moment, her path became clear to see. In Australia, she found Tzuchi's embrace. Illness struck her, a sign to change her taste. Though she still cooked meat, she felt divided. She felt the divide. As a teacher in Temasek Polytechnic, she did reside. 15 years she dedicated to imparting knowledge, but the taste of food she couldn't just acknowledge. In 2013, at the Water Repentance Sutra she sought to quit the meat world, her mind was finally caught. But the pay cut was daunting, a hurdle in her way. Sister Joyce returned, her conviction led astray. Yet within the school walls, she sought a new stride, introducing plant-based cuisine as her passionate guide. Eco projects she implemented were making a change, leaving a mark as her efforts rearranged. In 2019, she bid the school adieu. Fate led her to Everson Resort, to a journey anew. In Hualien, Thailand, a center of learning she found, Blue Lotus where Zen cuisines would astound. But the pandemic struck, the plans were disrupted. Back to Singapore, her path she reluctantly adjusted, engaging in recycling and promoting plant-based delight. Every day a chance to learn, her purpose shining bright. Always humble, Sister Joy's creed will remain, absorbing knowledge, new skills to attain, sharing with others and passing the torch, spreading joy and happiness with a gentle approach. 4 dreams she holds burning deep inside. First, to learn from Master Johan with utmost pride, a Korean nun, a chef renowned, whose wisdom and skill truly astound. The second dream she carries within her heart, to inspire others to embrace a plant-based start. For this is Master Ching Yen's vision of mercy and compassion. For all living creatures, it is a noble mission. The third aspiration, a spotlight on the screen, to grace the ITV's cooking show to be seen, displaying her talents for all to behold, her culinary artistry through food, her story to be told. And finally, her wish, a dream so sincere, to open a humble cafe, her creations to share. A sanctuary of flavors where hearts can unite, in Sister Joy's plant-based haven of culinary delights. Through her journey, she's touched countless souls. With each step she takes, her purpose unfolds. Sister Joyce, the compassionate chef with a heart so true, her vegetarian path and inspiration anew. Then we had the Veggie Promo team. In the realm of giving, a noble pursuit, Sister Effie binds hearts and roped in many communities' roots. uniting people and working for a cause to raise awareness of promoting plant-based laws. Since October's dawn in 2021, it has been countless acts since the team's mission began. 7,944 veggie bentos lovingly prepared, over 127 activities that compassion is shared. In terms of life saves, that is equivalent to fish 1,000 plus 3, or 662 chickens you see, or 530 trees their branches high, or 20 pigs oinks echoing in the sky. Neighborhoods connected through parks of peace. The team reached out to elderly and lonely and their sorrow ceased. In low-cost apartments, the sick find solace. In old folks and shelter homes, their spirits find release. Homeless, refugees, and schools all embrace with veggie bentos, hearts and minds retraced. Some turned vegetarian and their lives transformed. Many volunteers were born as their souls warmed. With open hearts, so many blessings were realized. Volunteers witnessing suffering and their compassion energized. Joy fills recipient who receive each meal. Volunteers' souls touch, kindness they reveal. Mr. Teo, a public volunteer's voice, shares the Pure Heart Veggie Promo Group's choice. Sister Hualien from Tawal Sabah's embrace. She finds joy in spreading love through each bento's grace. True cultivation lies in doing what is right. Seeds of kindness planted and the world's darkness to fight. Helping others feel good leads to a happier space. For the more you give, the more you embrace. The path cannot promote itself. We must spread its message and in each heart we trust. Sister Shu Ching spoke of the climate clock's chime, the countdown to the point of no return. We still have time. In schools, events unfold and knowledge ignite. The group's unity, strength through the day and night. Soul-stirring stories from every neighborhood. Veggie bentos is one of many Tzi's tools for good. Okay, Kanan for listening. Let me stop share. Okay, now I pass over to Sister Kaping to introduce the next speaker. Over to you, Sister Kaping.
Good morning, sisters and brothers, and good morning, Master Su. Thank you, Sister Shu Ching, for the wonderful summary of last week's sharing. And this morning, I have the honor to introduce Master Su. And in fact, Master Su in April shared with us, or she introduced the topic on nonviolent communication. How do we always wear a beautiful smile and connect with people without any confrontations and learn to resolve conflicts in a non-violent way? So this necessarily calls forth the fostering of empathy, compassion, and understanding with the intention, as Master Tesu say, to contribute to everyone's well-being. So this morning, we are very, very grateful to Master Tesu again in continuing on this topic of non-violent communication, sharing with us other components that makes this very important learning. So over to you, Master Tesu, and then.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Let me first pull up my PowerPoint. Okay, so good morning, everyone. So I'm very grateful to have the opportunity again to continue to share with you about nonviolent communication. So to refresh our memory a little bit from the last session, nonviolent communication is developed by Marshall Rosenberg, an American psychologist. He was motivated by his childhood experience to develop this method. He grew up in an environment that has violence, so he wanted to find ways where people could resolve conflicts in a peaceful way. And he found that the way people communicate often leads them to speak and behave in ways that injure themselves and others. He called this kind of communication life-alienating communication. And these include moralistic judgments, making comparisons, denial of responsibility, and making demands. Life-alienating communication tends to focus on the wrongness or the badness of people and judge them negatively. In nonviolent communication, Marshall wants people to focus on feelings and needs. And in the process of focusing on feelings and needs, we develop empathy. So there are 4 components to nonviolent communication. Last time I talked about needs, and today I want to talk about feelings. So in nonviolent communication, which is abbreviated NVC, feelings and manifestations are what is happening to our needs. When our needs are not being fulfilled, we feel unpleasant feelings. When our needs are being met, we feel pleasurable feelings. So I want to play a recording of Marshall telling a story of a prisoner, which illustrates the importance of understanding our feelings and needs. Because understanding our own feelings and needs helps us communicate better with people. And I chose to play this recording because you can listen to Marshall speak and get a sense of how he teaches his NVC class.
I was working on this subject with a group of prisoners in a prison, and one of them was very angry on this particular day, and I asked him what the stimulus for his anger was. What did somebody do that is triggering his anger? I could just tell he was so angry. He said, I made a request to the prison officials 2 weeks ago for some job training. I still haven't heard from them. I said, yeah, that tells me what the stimulus was for your anger. Now, what's the cause of your anger? He said, I just told you. And I said, oh, no, you remember from our previous session, I tried to make clear to you that it's never what other people do that makes us angry. It's how we think that makes us angry. So what are you telling yourself that's making you angry? He said, I don't know what you're talking about. People can make you angry. I said, no, people can't make you angry. If you followed me around in my work, you'd see this very clearly. For example, when I'm working in several places around the world where there's been a lot of violence, such as Rwanda, I was working with a group of people, all of whom had had at least one member of their family killed. And some of them were so angry that all they could live for was vengeance and think of getting back at the other people. And some of the people who had had horrible things happen to them were not angry. They weren't repressing the anger or denying it, but they were not thinking in a way that creates the anger. So not even something as dramatic as having a member of one's family killed can make you angry. So I said to this prisoner, so what are you telling yourself that does make you angry? And after a moment he said, well, I'm telling myself it isn't fair. I need the training that I requested, and they're just, ignoring me and treating me like I'm nothing. And he went on to give several other statements of the judgments that he had of the prison officials for not having gotten back to him about his request for job training. I said, okay, now you've answered my question of what causes your anger. Anger is caused by how you think. You think language that is disconnected from your needs and makes violence enjoyable. As the Christian theologian Walter Wink said, we've been educated for many years, thousands of years, to make violence enjoyable. See, all you need to do to make violence enjoyable is think there's bad guys, and that these bad guys deserve to suffer for what they've done, and it can make it enjoyable for you to create pain for these people. So anger is a very valuable feeling. It tells us we are perpetuating the thinking that creates that kind of anger. So with this prisoner, I showed him that it's valuable then, when you are angry, to be conscious that you're angry, because of your own thinking and not because of what the other person did. The other person's action is a stimulus for your anger, but not the cause. The cause is your thinking. Then I said to him, it's also very important, once you have identified the thinking that causes your anger, it's important to be conscious that that thinking is a tragic, suicidal expression of an unmet need. You see, anger tells us, in other words, that a need of ours isn't getting met. But our thinking doesn't connect with that need. Our connection goes to judging the other person who is the stimulus in a way that creates the anger. So I said to this prisoner, now go behind those judgments that you're making of the prison officials for not responding to your request for some job training. And what's the need behind all these judgments, that they're not being fair, they're treating you like you don't exist? What's the need that's behind all that thinking? He thought for a moment and said, I need to develop myself. I need skills for developing myself so I can earn a living when I get out of here. Otherwise, I'm going to end up back in here very quickly. Then I said to him, now how are you feeling at this moment that your attention is on those needs? And he said, I'm scared. You see, we cannot be angry when we're connected to life. And what I mean by connected to life is to be connected to our needs or to the needs of others. We can only be angry when we get disconnected from life and go up to our head and think in a way we have been programmed to think in terms of wrongness of the other person. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being angry. That would be unfortunate if I come across that way, because a lot of people have been educated to think that if you're a nice person, you don't get angry. And they've been taught to repress their anger. So I'm certainly not saying that. I'm saying the opposite. Anger is a friend of ours. It tells us we're thinking in a way that's contributing to violence on the planet. We're a part of that violence, and anger wakes us up and gives us a chance to transform our thinking to a kind of thinking that creates peace on our planet. So I said to him, notice how differently you feel when you're in touch with your needs than when you're judging the other people. When you tell me that you're scared that you're not going to get that need met. And he said, that's right. Now I said to him, you tell me you have an appointment to talk to them later this afternoon, the prison officials? He said, yes. I said, do you think you're more likely to get your needs met if you go in there thinking of what's wrong with them for not having contacted you by now and feeling angry about that? Or are you more likely to get your needs met if you go in there connected to your need for wanting to develop yourself and aware of your fear that you may not develop those skills? No matter what you might say to them, do you think you are more likely to come out with your needs met if in your head you have judgments of them implying wrongness on their part, or if you are conscious of your needs? He said, it's obvious. I'm much more likely to come out of there with what I want if I go in conscious of my needs. I said, I'm glad you see that. And at that moment, he walked over to the other side of the room and sat down and had a very sad look on his face. And I said to him, hey, what's going on? And he looked at me and said, I can't talk about it right now. After lunch, he came up to me and said with great sorrow in his voice, Marshall, I wish you had taught me 2 years ago about anger what you taught me this morning. If I had known that 2 years ago, I wouldn't have had to have killed my best friend. And then he went on to tell me this tragic story about how the friend said some things that just totally outraged him. And then he was thinking that he was angry at his friend for saying those things. He wasn't aware that the friend didn't cause his anger. The statements didn't cause his anger. It was how he thought about them that caused his anger. And he saw that if he could have connected to what his friend's needs were behind what the friend said, or if he had been connected to his own needs at that moment, there would have been ways of finding out strategies for meeting everybody's needs, and he wouldn't have had to have killed his best friend. So this principle is very important to liberating ourselves from language which is not conducive to our well-being or peace on the planet. And the awareness is that all language that implies wrongness, that is a criticism, insult, diagnosis of pathology of others, all such language is the cause of anger. Other people are never the cause, only the stimulus. The cause of anger is our thinking. And that thinking that causes the anger is a distorted expression of an unmet need. A distorted expression that not only interferes with getting the need met, but makes it enjoyable to be violent to others. So, whenever we're angry, nonviolent communication shows us how to stop, breathe, become conscious of what you are telling yourself that makes you angry. And when you see the thinking that makes you angry, transform it into the need that it's distorting. Ask yourself, wait a minute, what need of mine is not getting met that's being expressed through judgment of the other person? And you'll know that you have gotten connected to your need. Your body will tell you so. Your spirit will tell you so. We live in a different world when we are connected to what is alive in us, meaning our needs. We live in a different world than when we are up in our head judging other people in terms of rightness and wrongness. Now, learning how to become literate with a language of life, our needs, is going to take some practice. We're going to need to practice transforming language which stimulates violence into a language of life.
Okay, so that was Marshall's recording, and he says that we need to practice transforming our use of language from a language that stimulates violence into a language of life. So we need to get in touch with our feelings and learn to express our feelings, because expressing our feelings can help people connect with us and bring out their empathy. So Marshall talked about his own experience, which taught him the effect of hiding our feelings. But before going into the story, I need to explain a little bit about the US history for us to understand the story better. So for a period of time, nearly 90 years, the US implemented racial segregation, which is the practice of restricting people to certain areas of residence or to separate institutions and facilities on the basis of race. It's to separate colored people from the majority and mainstream communities, which were the white people. The colored people included Blacks and other ethnic minorities. Some examples of segregations are white people went to schools for whites and Black people went to schools for Blacks. White people could not go to schools for Blacks and vice versa. It was the same for restaurants, movies, restrooms, churches, etc. And on buses and trains, there were separate seats for whites and Blacks. So even though the US has the separate but equal doctrine, where everyone was supposed to receive the same public services, but with separate facilities for each race, in practice, the services and facilities reserved for Black people were almost always of lower quality than those reserved for white people. And Black people could not vote and were economically poor. There was also racial discrimination. For example, on a bus, when the white section of the seats were all filled, Black people in the colored section, they were supposed to give up their seats to white passengers. And because of this inequality, the civil rights movement started. It aimed to abolish racial segregation and discrimination and restore the voting rights of Black people. So people organized boycotts, sit-ins, marches, and took legal action to challenge the law. For example, In the Montgomery bus boycott, the Black people boycotted the bus company by not riding the buses. And this caused the bus company to lose a lot of revenue. The boycott lasted for 381 days until the local government repealed the law segregating Blacks and whites on public buses. And people also organized sit-ins. If a store had a lunch counter with segregated seating, Black people, they would buy food and sit in the white section as a protest. They kept doing this for weeks until the store desegregated the seating. So when Marshall was born, the civil rights movement was already there. When he was in his 30s, the civil rights movement reached its peak. So Marshall lived through the time of racial discrimination and riots. And due to the civil rights movement, the US government passed laws that prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. He also strengthened the enforcement of voting rights and the desegregation of schools. So even though the civil rights law were passed, it wasn't easy for white people to open up their hearts and welcome integration. Now, for example, when a Black man, James Meredith, won a lawsuit to secure admission to the previously segregated University of Mississippi, he was blocked by the Mississippi government to attend the university. So the federal government had to send law enforcement personnel to escort Meredith and protect him when he entered the university campus. In the evening that Meredith entered the university, the white students and other white people in the community started a riot at the campus, prompting the president of the US to send in the army to quell the riot. So there was a lot of racial tension in society back then. So now we go back to Marshall's story. Marshall worked a lot with schools and taught students and teachers about NVC. One time he was teaching a course in NVC to a group of inner city students. When he walked into the room on the first day, the students who had been enjoying a lively conversation with each other suddenly became quiet. So Marshall greeted them and said, "Good morning." The class was silent. So Marshall felt very uncomfortable, but he was afraid to express it. Instead, he proceeded in his most professional manner and presented information about NVC. But the students doesn't seem to be listening to him. One girl rummaged through her bag and took out a file and began filing her nails. And the students near the windows, they glued their faces to the pen as if fascinated by what was going on in the streets below. So Marshall felt increasingly more uncomfortable, yet continued to say nothing. And finally, one of the students mustered the courage and asked Marshall, "You just hated being with Black people, don't you?" And Marshall was stunned, but he immediately realized that he had contributed to the student's perception by trying to hide his discomfort. So Marshall admitted his feelings. He said, "I'm feeling nervous, but not because you are Black. My feelings have to do with my not knowing anyone here and wanting to be accepted when I came into the room." So this expression of his vulnerability had a pronounced effect on the students. They started to ask questions about him and tell him things about themselves and express curiosity about NVC. So by expressing our feelings, we help others understand our feelings. If we don't express our feelings and thoughts, other people won't know what we are thinking and feeling. Only when we have empathy, being able to understand each other, can the communication go through. So if we want our communication to be effective, we have to recognize one thing, which is we are responsible for our feelings. Our need is to be concerned with how we respond to people. This is important, especially when we hear things we don't like or receive criticism from people. Very often, we just react to people's comments and get into arguments. What we want to learn is to be able to make choices on how to respond to people in an appropriate way. So Marshall tells the story of his own experience. One time he went to a school system to promote his NVC method, but it didn't go very well. Through self-reflection and recognizing that he himself was responsible for what had happened, he was able to change the outcome when he went to another school system to promote his NVC method. So now I'm going to play a voice file and we can listen to his story.
I was presenting in front of 800 teachers in a school system, and I was asked to speak at their once-a-year meeting. And after I presented what I had to say about how to create schools in harmony with nonviolent communication, 4 of the school administrators were on a panel to react to what I said. And one of the persons said to me, when he heard that I was suggesting in our schools we had no punishments, and we didn't judge students as bad, but that we spoke honestly with them about whether or not their behavior was in harmony with our values or needs. We judge that way, but not judgments of a moralistic sort that implied wrongness. Well, I wasn't surprised that this might upset some of the school administrators, since this way of looking at the world is quite different than how many people have been educated. So he said with rather intense voices, it's people like you that are causing the problems we're having in the schools nowadays with all of your permissiveness. Above all, we administrators and teachers must teach students to obey authority and do what they're told. Now, something about the way he said above all just really stimulated me, and instead of acting in harmony with the principles I was teaching, I got very defensive and said to him, it's attitudes like that we should just obey authority above everything else. That's why 6 million people got shoved into ovens. This started a very unproductive discussion between us. What made it worse, some of the people in the audience applauded what I was saying, so I got into an argument with him about who's right, and we weren't connecting with what each other's needs were. And that evening, as I was driving from that workshop to another one in another city, I didn't like at all the way I handled him, how I responded to him. And the first few minutes I was in the car, I blamed myself. Oh, what a stupid thing to do. How could you have talked to him that way? You just ruined everything. You're never going to be invited back to that school system again. But then when I caught myself blaming myself, I stopped, saw this self-blame, and asked myself, wait a minute. What need of mine didn't get met by how I responded to that man? And right away I could see what the need was. I was not responding to him with the respect that I would like to respond to people. I wasn't meeting my own need for respecting people. Now, when I saw that need, I was very sad, but at least I didn't feel the kind of feelings I felt when I was blaming myself, the shame, the guilt, the anger toward myself. But I felt a deep sadness. I could see that I was not responding to him in a way that met my need for respecting of people. And then I asked myself, what need of mine was I trying to meet by behaving in the way that I did? And all of a sudden it became very clear to me what my need was. I needed understanding for how frightening it was for me to hear somebody saying, above all, we have to teach people obedience to authority. The word above all stimulated in me memory of how in Nazi Germany people were educated to believe above all you have to obey the Führer. So then I saw both parts of myself. I mourned that I didn't meet my need for respect the way I treated this person. But I could also see that I behaved as I did out of my need for understanding, for how frightening it was for me, for authorities to have this belief that above all, we have to teach children obedience to authority. Now, by being in touch with both of those needs, I have a better chance to learn, because I said to myself, now, how would I have liked to have behaved differently in that situation? And I realized if I had behaved differently, I would have liked to have understood what that person was feeling and needing behind his statement. Above all, we have to teach children obedience. And I realized that he probably had a need for order and safety in the schools, and believes that this is important for having rules to maintain this order and safety. And I had the same needs, so then I could see that we didn't have different needs. We might have had different strategies, but we didn't have different needs. So I saw that if I would have heard that message with empathy and seen that we had the same needs, I would have responded to him in a much different way, in a way that I believed we could have learned from each other without becoming enemies. That night, I was presenting in another school system, and a person responded to me in a very similar way to how the principal had responded to me earlier that day. But this time, thanks to the learning that I went through while driving in the car, when this person said, "We have to teach children obedience to authority. It's people like you with your permissiveness that's causing the problems we have nowadays." Now I could hear behind those words, and I could hear the need for order and safety. And I said to him, "Sir, are you concerned with what you hear me saying? Because you want to be sure we have order and safety in the schools, and we need rules in order for that to happen." And he said, "That's right." And then I could show him that I was also in favor of rules, but that I showed him a different way of establishing rules, and rules based on the protective use of force and not the punitive use of force. And we connected in a very positive way. After that meeting, he came up to me and said he was a minister at one of the local churches, and he wanted to apologize for coming and saying the things he had said at the beginning. He said, "I see now I didn't understand the kind of program you and the superintendent are trying to create here in the system." He said, "I would like to invite you to come to my church and give a presentation to the people in my church. I think it would be very helpful for them." And that started a connection I had with him and his church that lasted 20 years, where twice a year I would go to his church and do training in nonviolent communication.
Okay, so from these stories, we see that our feelings result from how we choose to receive what others say and do, as well as from our particular needs and expectations in that moment. So with this, we are led to accept responsibility for what we do to generate our own feelings. What others say and do may be the stimulus, but never the cause of our feelings. So when we express our needs indirectly through the use of evaluations, interpretations, and images, others are likely to hear criticism. The more directly we can connect our feelings to our own needs, the easier it is for others to respond compassionately to our needs. This was what Marshall did. He tried to connect to his feelings and needs after he had that argument with the principal. And after he clarified his own feelings and needs, he tried to connect to that principal's needs. So in the evening workshop, Marshall was able to get what he wanted to accomplish, which was for people to accept the NVC method. Now, what gets in the way for us to connect with our own feelings and needs is ignorance and afflictions. So now I want to make the connection of NVC to Buddhism. The master tells us that afflictions and ignorance are like ropes. they entangle us, causing us to have wrong thinking and making us deluded. And when afflictions and ignorance arise in our heart and we don't entangle them right away, they will accumulate. The more they accumulate, the harder it is for us to entangle them. And the Buddha teaches us that through self-reflection, we can realize what causes our afflictions, notice our wrong thinking, and acknowledge what wrongs we've done. By correcting our wrongs, we entangle our afflictions and ignorance. So when I heard Marshall's story of going to the school system to promote NVC, and he ended up arguing with the principal, I thought about Master's teaching on the 5 false views. The 5 false views are the view of self, extreme view, wrong view, holding wrong views as spring, and view of rules and practices. Now, the first is the view of self. We have the notion of self, and we think that this is self. We think that this self or I is real. But in reality, the self is made out of the 5 aggregates of form, feelings, perceptions, action and mental activities, and consciousness. And these 5 aggregates are transient. There's no real self that we can possess. The second is extreme view, which is the view that after we die, either life ends and there's no afterlife, or life persists after death in some eternal and unchanging form. The third is wrong view, which is the denial of the law of cause and effect. People who have this view don't believe in the law of karma. The fourth is holding wrong views as supreme. This is where people adhere to misconceptions and views them as truth. They hold rigidly the one opinion over all others. This is also the thinking that our wrong views are the best views to hold. Now, the last is the view of rules and practices. This is viewing erroneous practices or precepts as the correct way to enlightenment. And this is where people do not have the correct way of spiritual cultivation. These 5 false views react very fast. When we encounter something, our mind activates these 5 false views very fast, and we react on things very fast. For example, after Marshall heard the principal's comment, he retorted back quickly, and they ended up arguing. This is the result of having the 5 false views. How come Marshall started to argue with the principal? Because he misinterpreted the principal's words. And because of this misinterpretation, he formed bad affinity with the principal. After Marshall self-reflected on his own feelings and needs, and then tried to empathize with the principal's needs, Marshall got rid of his false view. So in that evening workshop, Marshall ended up forming a very good affinity with the minister. So in the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, it tells us to cultivate our heart and mind so that we can be completely free from perversity and distractions, free from any kind of delusion. So delusion and distracting thoughts are like ropes. Just like afflictions and ignorance, they entangle our heart and mind. When we encounter a situation, our delusions cause us to not see things clearly. We react with our habitual tendencies, and we cannot freely choose the appropriate way to respond. So we need to use the Dharma to get rid of our delusions and the 5 false views. But sometimes the 5 false views act so fast, before we know it, we've already done wrong. So what do? We need to set aside a time to entangle the rope of afflictions and ignorance. Ignorance and afflictions entangle and distort our feelings and thoughts. We entangle the rope and straighten it out by sorting out our feelings and thoughts. The methods in nonviolent communication can help us entangle our feelings, needs, thoughts, etc. And this is done through self-reflection. When we first use NVC to interact with people, it'll take time because we're not used to think in terms of feelings and needs. I'll take myself, for example. One time, something happened and I was a bit baffled. I wanted to figure out why, but there were so many things happening during the day that I couldn't calm my mind to think about it. So at nighttime, when everything was quiet, I took out my notebook and a pen. I started to analyze my thinking. What are my feelings? What are my needs? What are my thoughts? And I wrote them all down so I could see it and know what's going on in my head. Just doing this exercise took me 15 minutes. If I were to interact with people like this, it's unlikely that that person will wait 15 minutes for my response. So this is why at first we need to set aside time to train our mind to think in terms of feelings and needs. The more we do this, the better we'll get, and the faster we will be able to know our feelings and needs and respond to others clearly what our feelings, needs, and thoughts are. Through this method, we can detect the negative feelings and thoughts like greed, anger, ignorance, arrogance, and doubt in our heart and transform them into empathy. We'll also know other people's needs and nurture our compassion to give compassionately to fulfill other people's needs. And we can also transform our 5 false views into that of the Dharma. So we won't have any delusions, but correct views. In doing this, we hope to create positive karma and do good deeds that benefit all living beings and the world. So to summarize the talk, our feelings tells us whether our needs are being met. When it comes to feelings, we are responsible for our feelings. How we feel depends on what we think. But our afflictions and ignorance hinder us from getting in touch with our feelings and needs. Through self-reflection, we can become more aware of our views, feelings, and needs. By getting rid of our false views, we'll be able to respond to people in an appropriate way that leads to the outcome that we desire. So of the four components of NVC, I've already covered 2, feelings and needs. So next time, I plan to talk about the first component, observation, and a little bit about empathy. And so this is my talk today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Cảm ơn so much, 师父 the Shu. It's really, really beneficial, and from what I could gather, is really, how we think make us angry. People can't make us angry, but it is their action that become the stimulus for our anger, but that's not our cause. So it's really very, very deep, and it really, it's something that makes me think really hard. So it's really, we should not be judgmental. We should always put ourselves in others' shoes and put others' needs above the self. And we shouldn't, play the victim role or get into a blame game. And I think that is really the great teaching today from Master the Shu. And we look forward really to the next session when Master talk about observation and feelings, etc. Yeah. So will there be any question for Master the Shu? Because we have another 4 minutes. If there's any question from the floor. Sư Phụ, actually, when you were talking of, this process of understanding the needs and also, letting go of our judgment, it reminded me of what Sangren taught in the Wisdom at Dawn 2 days ago about letting go of our attachments to self-view, because only then can true principles enter and return to source. So this really requires the practice of 闻思修 and 戒定慧. Am I correct to say that from your teaching today?
Yes, actually, the master says that our mind created everything. So whenever we encounter problems and situations, we should always go back to our heart and our mind and see what is our thinking, what is our thoughts, and what are feelings that created the situation. So if we can self-reflect, and a lot of time, you solve half of the problem, because when problem arises, it is usually not because of one person, but it takes two to create problem. So if we can solve problem on our end, then we solve half of the problem. And the other half, it really depends on the other person, whether they want to also solve the problem too. And Master always tells us to work in harmony with other people. But in order to do that, we have to be willing to work in harmony with others first. If people don't want to work in harmony with one another, then there's no way that we can solve the problem. So people really have to recognize that their own thinking. If they want to work in harmony with others, then we'll find a way to do that.
Yes. So actually, a lot of these, confrontations is really because of our self-view. We always think that we are right. And therefore, when people challenge us, we become very, very defensive of our views. And hence, we get into a conflict of trying to prove that we are right. So again, there's this attachment of being right and others are wrong. So that's something, I think came out very, very clearly today in Master Su's sharing. Yes, we have Brother Chris Chu, who raised hand, have a question. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Master Su, and good morning, everyone. Just a quick one. While we are going through this process of learning that to control our feelings and our reactions, that means we will be we really don't have time to reflect on things like what you were saying, that you need 15 minutes, all right, to go and reflect on it, so that we will keep committing some these mistakes until we really get the hang of it and do it the right way, and get rid of our wrong views. This is something that we are afraid to try, because we have to practice and get it right over a period of time. It's not just we learn it once and then we can get it right.
Yeah, actually, this takes practice, and I would have to say that it's don't be afraid to make mistakes, because we have to start somewhere. If we don't start doing the right thing and learn from our mistakes, then we'll never improve. So actually making mistakes and learning about them and improving on them is actually free for us, but we have to take the first step to do it.
Thank you so much, Supu. Can we take a group photo? Sister Lily, please take a group photo before Master has to go. Yeah, appreciate if brothers and sisters can switch on your video, please. I'll take a picture with Master Su and also Brother Johan. I saw that Brother Johan has just joined us. Thank you. Mr. Waiphong, can you help, please? Yeah, for sister who is not sharing, can you please switch off your microphone, because we could hear you. Okay, Gan En for the picture. Gan En, Supu. Next, I would like to invite Brother Johan. Brother Johan is no stranger to all of us. He has shared many times on this platform about his volunteering experiences in many countries and also about his life story. And today, Brother Johan will be sharing with us the UN, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 of them. This is a topic very, very close to my heart. I remember some 5 years ago at one of the city entrepreneurs function in Berjaya Times Square in Kuala Lumpur, I shared about SDGs way of doing ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and how corporates can actually make use of SDGs platform to foster their practice of ESG. So really, we can't wait to hear and learn more from Brother Johan today on this topic. So go ahead, brother. The floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here again, and always so happy to share with all of you and also to learn from all of you. Thank you so much, Master Shu. I think nonviolent communication is a very important skill to have, and I really recommend to everyone to read the book. This is not, wait, give me 1 second. Okay, hopefully it will work better like this. I have my phone just in case my computer breaks down, because it did just before. So can you hear me okay, or is there echo right now? It's okay. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Okay, awesome. So I would like to start with the story of a farmer. She's a female farmer. Her name is Mary. You can see her name is Mary. She's a farmer in a developing country, and she is experiencing a series of challenges. So first of all, she's trying to farm, but there has been drought for several years, which is really making it almost impossible for her to grow any crops, or at least grow enough to survive, and not to mention to sell on the market. Then there are laws that prohibit women from owning land, which means that she can't own her own land. And since she can't own her land, she cannot borrow money using the land as a security, which means she can't invest. So it would be possible to help the drought with irrigation, but she doesn't have the money to invest herself, and she can't borrow money because she can't own the land. There's also a lack of quality seed and equipment for treating the harvest. So once she is harvested, all she can do is just hand thrash the crops that she has grown. So it's very inefficient, and the quality is not as high as it could be. She has no usable roads that goes to the village. So the infrastructure in this country is not very good. So that means that it's very difficult for her, even if she manages to get some harvest, it's difficult for her to get that harvest to market in the city. Then she has 2 or 3 children, and unfortunately the school that they go to is in very poor condition. Actually, they have a lot of their classes outdoors because they don't have enough classrooms. They also are taught 50 people to a class, just sitting on the ground. They don't have any textbooks, so they have to write their textbooks basically themselves. And of course, this means that their children's education is also very weak compared to what it could have been. Then another issue is that around where she lives, there is no clean drinking water. They're taking the water out of a river or a stream, and that water is contaminated. So the children often get diarrhea. Then in her house, there is no light indoors. She doesn't have any electricity. So it's difficult once the sun goes down. The children can't study, which also affects their studies and their future. Then not too long ago, her father fell ill, but in the village where she lives, there is no medical treatment available, and she can't afford transportation that would the cost to take him to town to get proper medical treatment. And most recently, and this might be in a sense the worst part of it, is that she's very scared because in nearby villages, there have been gangs coming down from the mountains, raping and stealing, raping women and stealing their property. And there is no police or other law enforcement around that can protect her. So you can see that this woman has a large number of difficulties in life. And unfortunately, this is life for hundreds of millions of people every single day on our planet. And this is exactly why the Sustainable Development Goals were developed. So we have 17 goals, including no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, and a number of other goals. So now I would like to ask all of you to look at the screen that you see in front of you and type in the chat, and do this as quickly as you can. Type in the chat which of these goals would have helped Mary if they were already implemented. So please type in the chat. I'll give you 30 seconds and type as many goals as you think make sense to Mary's situation right now. So while you type, I will continue to list the goals. So I already mentioned clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities. You can just type the numbers in the chat. Sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, and peace, justice, and strong institutions, and then finally partnerships for the goals. Okay, I don't see any messages right now. Are you all typing? There we go, excellent. 1, 3, 4, okay, no poverty, good health and well-being, and quality education. All of them. Yes, all of them would certainly be helpful, but there are certain goals that specifically would be helpful for Mary in her situation. Maybe not every single one of them. So good health and well-being, quality education, yes, very much. What about clean water and sanitation? Number 6. What about gender equality? Number 5. How about affordable and clean energy? Does she have electricity in her home? Okay, I need more people to type. Okay, we have no poverty, zero hunger, clean water, decent work, affordable and clean energy, education, peace and justice. Very good. Climate action. Yes, because there has been droughts, and of course that is related to climate change. Responsible consumption. Okay. Peace and justice again. Yes. All right. 1, 2, 6. No poverty, zero hunger, clean water and sanitation. 5 and 3. Gender equality, good health and well-being. Very good. We also have 6 and 8. Clean water and sanitation, decent work and economic growth. Yes. Good. 13. Climate action, yes. 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, and thank you for getting active. I'm going to do this a few times here, so please be prepared to type in the chat whenever I ask you questions, and hopefully I can help everyone wake up as well. All right, so let me give you a history of the development, the Sustainable Development Goals. So before the Sustainable Development Goals, there were the Millennium Development Goals. So these were 8 goals that were adopted by the UN in the year 2000. And they stretched from 2000 to the target year of 2015. These goals, they were especially focused on the poorest countries. So including extreme poverty and hunger, maternal health. There was a very strong effort on maternal health and child mortality. There was an effort on HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. So getting rid of these worst diseases that kill the most people. On universal primary education was another important part, and also environmental improvement was another part. So these goals, as I said, they were adopted in 2000, and the milestone for these goals was 2015. So looking at the results of these goals for the countries in the world, some ways of calculating show that at least 21 million extra lives were saved due to the accelerated progress due to these goals. And the vast majority of this was in sub-Saharan Africa, in the very poorest countries, the extreme poverty countries. We can also see here that if we look at the extreme income poverty here, it's the orange. So this is the different continents. We see that we had a huge increase in or decrease of extreme income poverty after the goals. So as many as 471 million people were lifted out of extreme poverty thanks to these goals. And we could also see that because the efforts of these goals were focused on the lowest income countries, so we could see that over time, the improvement was the fastest in the lowest income countries, whereas middle income countries, their improvement was slower. So that means that the special efforts given to the lowest income countries actually had an effect. So overall, we could say that while these goals were not 100% met, they were definitely strong accelerators for progress for the poorest countries in the world. So seeing this success, the UN, after 2015, of course, not every problem in the world had been resolved thanks to these millennium goals. So after 2015, the UN started thinking about, okay, from 2015 and the next 15-year period from 2015 to 2030, what do we want to do for our next stage of development? So in a very broad process, there were a new set of goals developed. And so one of the criticisms for the Millennium Development Goals was that a lot of players, a lot of stakeholders were not at the table when they were determined. So in particular, the people that were actually most severely affected by the goals were not at the table when the goals were developed. The next step of goals, so the Sustainable Development Goals that were developed 2012 to 2015, had a very broad participatory process, including all the countries of the world, as well as civil society players and many other different stakeholders were involved in the development and definition of these goals. And they were adopted by all 193 countries in the UN General Assembly in 2015. So as you can see just before, it's 17 goals, and they are divided into 3 pillars, and I will show these in the next slide. And the target year, as I mentioned, so it's from 2015 to 2030. So it's not forever, it's to 2030. And the slogan for these goals is leave no one behind. So the idea is that everyone in the world will get part of the improvement thanks to these goals. So the pillars, we have the first pillar is the economic pillar, which includes no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, decent work, and infrastructure. Then the second pillar is the environmental pillar. So we have clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, climate action, responsible consumption and production, life below water, and life on land. So it's a very broad, as we can see, a very broad take on the environment. And then the third goal is the social pillar, which includes education, gender equality, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and finally, number 17, the partnerships for the goals. So a lot of times when we think of sustainability, we tend to think of the environmental pillar only. We think about climate change, we think about biodiversity, about the triple crisis of the earth. But actually, these goals are even way more broad than that. They also include the economic pillar, including infrastructure, industry innovation, decent work, economic growth, and so on, and also the social pillar, including peace, justice, and strong institutions. So when we think of these goals, we want to have a very broad and very general perspective. Okay. So if we take one of these as an example, quality education, then apart from this general goal, just saying quality education, it doesn't really say much about what we want to, the details of what we want to accomplish. But if we then look in detail, each of these goals has a number of targets. And each target is very well defined. So target 4.1 is free primary and secondary education for all children. Number 2, equal access to quality pre-primary education. Number 3, equal access to affordable technical, vocational, and higher education, and so on. So you have the different types of goals, of targets within each of these goals. So when we look at, for example, we want to see if SDGs work is aligned with the goals. We don't want to just look at the goal, actually. We want to look at the target to see if SDGs work is contributing directly to these targets, any of these targets. And then there are also indicators to decide for metrics of how far we come for these targets. So we have a total of 17 goals and almost 10 targets per goal, so 169 targets in total. And I really recommend to go to this website, sdgs.un.org/goals, and look in detail about these goals. You can just click through all the goals and learn about the targets, especially the ones that you're most interested in. And it's actually very, very important reading. So I really strongly recommend for you to go to this website, and if someone can type it in the chat, that would be great as well, and learn more about the goals. You can also just search for Sustainable Development Goals and you'll find it. So how are we doing in April 2023? So this was last month. A report came out from the UN Secretary General, and the result is that we are doing very poorly. We are not nearly on track to meet these goals by 2030. So if we look at the green bars, and you don't see any green on SDG 1, we do see a little bit of green on SDG 2, and so on. The green bars show the goals that are not that we have already reached the goal, but that are on track to be met by 2030. Only 12% of the targets, out of these 169 targets, only 12% are on track to be met by 2030. 30% of the targets are the red ones here. So they are the ones that have stagnated completely or regressed below the level of 2015, the starting point. And another very worrying part is, if you look at SDG 11, for example, you have more than half of the targets are gray, which means that we don't have the data to be able to evaluate whether this target is on track or not. So the lack of data is a huge issue with these goals, and especially, of course, in the poorer countries that have less developed statistical institutions. So the result is that currently we are doing very poorly, and everyone's efforts are needed in order to improve this situation. So what does this mean in real terms? Well, under the current trends, if nothing is done to improve the situation, 575 million people will be living in extreme poverty by 2030. 84 million children will not be going to school, and out of those that are going to school, 300 million will leave school unable to read and write. Renewables will make up only a small fraction of the global energy supplies, and 660 million people will still live without electricity, and nearly 2 billion, so that's 1/4 of the world's population, will have no access to clean cooking. So we are looking at a very, very bad future if we don't pick up the pace for these goals. So now, looking at the way forward, what can be done in order to reverse this development and make progress on the goals? Well, there are some types of actions that have impact across multiple goals. And I will give you some examples, and then I will give you 2 examples that we can look more in detail about. So Investing in education. This has a very broad impact across many of these goals. It's an investment in the youth, and it's an investment in the future. Promoting renewable energy. This also has impact across multiple goals, because on one hand, it will bring energy to the people that need it. On the other hand, it brings job opportunities. It also improves on the environmental side, in the climate side, and so on. Investing in clean water and sanitation has a huge effect on general health, life quality, and so on. Support sustainable agriculture. Sustainable agriculture is typically small scale, so this brings job opportunities, it brings food security, and it brings improvements on the environmental side, both in terms of biodiversity and in terms of the climate crisis and life below water as well. Then protect and restore ecosystems. So the ecosystems currently, it's a huge issue. The deforestation in particular due to agricultural development is an enormous issue. So protecting and restoring ecosystems will not only bring environmental improvement, but also new types of economic income. Then a very important one is to strengthen local and multilateral decision making. So usually it's the people that are on the ground that are local, they are the ones who know the best what the situation is on the ground. So strengthening the decision making at the local level is a very important aspect of these development goals. And also on the multilateral level. So multilateral means on the UN level, so between countries. So on the lowest, the most local level, and the most global level. In both these, it's very important to strengthen decision-making and partnerships. So these are some examples of goals that would cut across a vast range of these sustainable development goals, so actions that would cut across them. But I would like to take two specific examples, and one is invest in women and girls. So there are two additional ones. I mean, there are many other actions, of course, but there are two additional actions that I would really like to highlight. And the first one is investing in women and girls. So investing in women and girls is a crucial, something that would cut across a vast majority of these goals, because women and girls are usually the poorest, have the worst health. They also have enormous potential. So this would have a very strong impact on goal number 1, no poverty. On goal number 2, zero hunger, because women and girls usually are the most vulnerable in terms of food security, but also women are the ones that produce the most food in the world. So by giving the opportunity to invest in these women, they can improve their food production and bring food to market. Then we have good health and well-being. So female health is very much worse than male health in many parts of the world. And women, of course, also have special needs because they're child rearing. Quality education, that would be an important part of this investment. Gender equality, obviously, that's a very direct one. Then we have decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So how can you have good innovation if half of the world's population are not part of the innovative workforce? Reduced inequalities in general, and peace, justice, and strong institutions. By bringing women into decision making, you will have new perspectives which will improve the overall peace, justice, and institutions of the world. So we can see that this action, investing in women and girls, is something that can have a range of an impact across a range of goals. And I might very well have missed some of the goals in this overview as well. Another one is to protect and involve indigenous populations. The indigenous populations are crucial in many, many ways. And they're also the most vulnerable in many, many places. So no poverty, zero hunger, and reduced inequalities. because indigenous populations tend to be the poorest, they tend to be the worst in terms of food security. But zero hunger, also because indigenous populations, they have a lot of techniques, they have a lot of knowledge of how to produce food in a sustainable way. So reducing inequalities, of course, is immediate. Then we have sustainable citizen communities and responsible consumption and production, because indigenous communities, if they are involved in decision making, they will have a different perspective on how to make citizen communities sustainable and on how to consume and produce. And they can also inspire other segments of society to improve in these aspects. Then we have the entire environmental aspect of climate action, life below water and life on land, where the knowledge and traditions of these indigenous populations could have an enormous impact. So it's actually been shown that the land that is protected by indigenous populations, that is stewarded by indigenous populations, has a much higher degree of biodiversity than traditional, what we would call traditional national parks, for example. So indigenous populations living within and together with that nature, they can steward this nature to improve biodiversity compared to just leaving nature alone. So actually, they have a huge role to play. And of course, the additional input and the additional perspectives from these indigenous populations within our institutions, in our justice system, and in our local and international conversations will have an impact on peace, justice, and strong institutions. So we can see that for some of these goals, for some of these actions, they really cut across a huge number of goals. And these can be relatively cheap, relatively low cost actions, like protecting and investing in women and girls, protecting and involving indigenous populations, can have a huge leverage over the resources that need to be put in. So now, actually, are there any questions? Okay, so we have right, okay, thank you. So feel free to put in questions at any point, and I will try to keep the chat window open here so I can see the questions when they come. So what about SDG and the SDGs? Well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the importance of grassroots action. So SDG is an example of a grassroots organization that brings together people from all walks of life. And this is a very important aspect of the SDGs. It's part of SDG number 17 about partnerships, to really listen to grassroots organizations and to bring everyone's voices to the table. So there are multiple important aspects of grassroots action when it comes to the SDGs. One is to ensure that all voices are heard, because every person is important in this. The Sustainable Development Goals are for everyone, and the key is leaving no one behind. And how can we ensure that we don't leave anyone behind if we are not listening to every player on the table, every stakeholder? Also, grassroots action brings a sense of ownership. If I am personally involved in the development of these goals, in the action to make these goals happen, then I will have a sense of ownership, and I will be much more effective in my work for the goals. Mobilizing communities to take action is another important aspect, because individuals and even governments can only do so much. You need the entire communities to work together for every single one of these goals. Then the local communities have a lot of insights, whether it's the indigenous populations, whether it's women and girls, or the community as a whole. there will be insights coming up, a lot of ingenuity, innovation that can come up from local communities. And also, grassroots action is a way to maintain the pressure on decision makers, the people that have the power to make a change at all levels, whether local, regional, or national level, or even global level. So grassroots action is very, very important in reaching these goals. So now, how does our work here in SDG contribute to the SDGs? And I will give you a couple of examples first, and then I will let you guys think for yourself and give your input to what you think for a couple of examples. So if we take home visits, for example, and family care, there is one goal that is very obviously helped by home visits, and that would be the goal of no poverty. So we have like one very obvious goal. Then, of course, it has impact on many other goals as well, but one very obvious one. Tuition assistance programs, of course, it's about quality education. Then we have free clinics, well, good health and well-being. So some of these actions that SDG is taking are very immediate. Water well building, constructing water wells, of course, it will bring clean water and sanitation to the villages and towns where this is being done. But if we look at something like recycling work, actually it has an impact across a range of goals. And I would love to hear your input on which you think would bring. So feel free to type in the chat. I'll give you a minute. Go ahead, type. Where does recycling have an impact? And feel free to start with the very obvious ones. 12, responsible consumption and production. Excellent, I really like that. 11, sustainable citizen communities. Yes. 12, climate action. 14, 15, life below water and life on land. Yes. 17, partnership for the goals. Good. Number 19, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Definitely innovation, also infrastructure. Yes. Excellent. Okay, I want to see more people. Sister Karpeng has been very active, but I want to see everyone. Come on. Any additional goals? So, my own experience. Please keep typing. I'll just keep talking, just to have something to listen to while you think and type. So my own experience is that when I went to the recycling station, I could really see the impact of the overconsumption that we have, and it definitely made me think about my own consumption. Do I really buy only what I need rather than just anything I want? So I think that's a very strong impact of goal number 12. It makes people think when they are engaged themselves in recycling, it makes them think about their own consumption. So I think the connection to goal number 12 is actually really a really great example. Also, sustainable citizen communities. We have in particular the recycling stations. I mean, you reduce the amount of trash overall by having recycling. So that makes citizen communities more sustainable. There are other aspects as well that nobody brought up yet. So what about the seniors that are doing the recycling? Is their health improved? I don't see any response yet. Okay, I would definitely put number 3 as well, especially the way that that recycling is done in Taiwan, and I'm sure around the world as well. That is helping seniors keep their good health. Then number 16. So at least in Taiwan, the income from the recycling stations goes towards Dai TV, and Dai TV is a very powerful force of goodness and peace in Taiwan and internationally. So I would say that at least in Taiwan, the recycling is indirectly contributing to goal number 16 through the ITV. Okay, so let me continue. I don't want to take too much time. And let's take the next example, vegetarianism promotion. So I'd like you to once again type what goals can be furthered by vegetarianism, by promoting vegetarianism. Okay, I'll show you the goals again. There you go. So vegetarianism. And I would love for everyone's voice to be heard. I think there's a lot of, I mean, you can always think like one step deeper about these goals and look at impact that you might not immediately think of. So I think that's a very interesting and important aspect of this. So I would love to hear everyone's thoughts. How does vegetarianism, oh, excellent. L Chan, Miss Brother L, 2, 3, 14, 15. So 2, 0 hunger, excellent. Because vegetarian food takes so much less resources than and brings so much more food to humans if we don't feed that all that crops to animals. Number 3, good health and well-being, excellent. Number 14 and 15, life below water and life on land, very good. Then we have 12, responsible consumption and production, good, good. 13, climate action, yes, very important. 14, 15, yes. 2, 3, 12, 13, very good, yes. Hey, feel free to. Yeah, this is already much better. Thank you so much. So what about decent work? So you might have read about, especially during COVID, there was quite a lot of news about the meat industry, the meat plants, where workers got COVID to a much higher extent than other workplaces because the work environment was so poor. So actually, by removing meat from our tables, we're actually improving the type of work. I mean, the type of work. We're removing the worst work and giving opportunities for much higher quality work by, for example, producing vegetarian meat substitutes. Excellent. Thank you so much, brother or sister TC. Yeah, very good. Number 8. Let's see. Decent work in economic growth. Yes. 4, 9. Industry innovation, yes, very good, yes. There's a lot of innovation right now when it comes to vegetarianism, so that's also an important aspect. Excellent, great job, everyone. Very happy. You are a wonderful audience, and I love to have a little bit of a dialogue rather than just one-way communication. So this is really great. Thank you. So I would like to end by talking a little bit about partnerships for the goals. And actually, I think I might be out of time. I've been talking for about 40 minutes, but it's our time. When is our time up?
Brother, we have time up to 8:10. So we have a good
up to 8:10. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Then I have a little bit of a chance to talk about number 17, because this is another aspect where SDG is very active, but not everyone might be aware of how active SDG is in this aspect. And of course, myself being from the partnership, global partnership department, so this is very close to my heart, obviously. So we have different types of partnerships that we are engaged in. One is partnerships for positive influence. So we are working together with other organizations to bring these important topics to the table internationally, including in the UN. You can see the UN building in New York on the right-hand side. And if you look carefully, you see among the little people that are there in front from a number of different organizations to the far right, you have our brother Steve Chu. To the bottom left, you see CD representatives that Sister Tiffany at COP27. So COP is the conference of the parties of the climate agreement. And then on the top, you see an example of an online event, which was an intergenerational dialogue, which was online and held in English as well as in Chinese. So there were two dialogues, one in English and one in Chinese, online in August last year. So CD does a lot of these of this type of work, and we would love for more of you, especially since you're part of the English-speaking CD, to get even more involved if you can in these partnerships. And these kinds of events can happen on the local level. Like recently, there was a conference in Australia. Late last year, there was a conference in Australia about disaster prevention, an international conference that was held in Australia. So, and I mean, there are conferences that are held in Malaysia, in Singapore, in the Philippines, and all over Asia and all over the world that we individuals as CD volunteers can get involved with. And if you hear of a conference and you would like to get support to get into it, then you can always contact us at the Global Partnerships Affairs Department, and we will do our best to help. So that's one aspect of partnerships. Another aspect of partnerships is partnerships to counter big challenges such as COVID, for example. So during the COVID, and I'm sure many of you were part of this work as well. So this was not just our little department, of course. This was done throughout CG's organization. So CG as a whole partnered with over 7,000 organizations to provide, especially to provide personal protective equipment all around the world during the COVID pandemic. And so we're giving out literally millions of actually tens of millions of COVID prevention materials. And you can go to the website, the global website, to get an update on how many has been given out until now. Right now, I mean, this COVID is pretty much over, at least the worst case. So these numbers are pretty final at this point. Well, we're talking about 26 million face masks and over 1 million pairs of face guards and goggles and so on. So this is a huge impact. And this could never have been done without all these partnerships, because CD is not on the ground in all these countries, including, say, Italy and the Vatican. CD provided face masks to the Vatican, and also provided oxygen concentrators to India, where we didn't have any volunteers. So all of this work was done. A lot of this work was done through partnerships, through other organizations. So as a whole, during the COVID pandemic, we provided PPEs to 96 countries all around the world. Then another example is our partnerships for Ukraine. So here we partnered with 8 organizations, or 11, depending on how you count, to provide assistance to the refugees from Ukraine. And thanks to this, we were able to have a geographical spread that we could never have had without these partnerships, including 7 countries around Ukraine, such as Moldova, Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, and also inside of Ukraine, we have collaboration with organizations that provided medical equipment as well as food inside of Ukraine. And these partnerships are still ongoing. The Ukraine crisis is still ongoing. The war is ongoing, and the need is still there. And we shouldn't forget the partnerships within Poland, where we had over 3.5 million refugees going into Poland, and now there are still close to 2 million refugees from Ukraine in Poland. And they need, at this point, it's been over a year, they need to learn Polish language, they need to find jobs, they need to adapt to the reality, they need to deal with their traumas from the war. And all of these services are provided through our partners. SDG could never do this. We are not on the ground. We could not go in and provide therapy, for example, or therapeutical activities for children. We might not have the expertise, and two, we don't have the manpower and the local knowledge to do it, and we don't have the language to do it. So none of this could have been done without the partnerships that we have with these organizations in Poland, in Ukraine, and in the countries around. So final words, and I have 2 more minutes, so that is perfect. So the sustainable development needs everyone. These goals, in order to reach these goals, and these goals are crucial for the survival and flourishing of all humans on this world, on this earth. So we need everyone to get involved. They're way too important to leave to only governments. So not just as individuals, but every group, every community, and every business needs to take action. And all of us, all of you, you're not only individuals, you're also part of a group, SDG, and maybe of other groups. You're part of a community, you live in a community, you're part of that community. And many of you are employees in a business, or you even own a business. And as a business, we can also take action to create a better world. So I would like to give you a call to action. So one is seek local partnerships. Together we can do so much more than we can do alone. Focus on one SDG that you think is the most important and meet up with your local people, whether it's other civil organizations, whether it's with community groups, with businesses, or with local and national governments. Meet up with them, discuss with them, learn from them, learn together, inspire each other, and most importantly, work together to really make an impact for these goals. So that's my talk today. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Johan. I can feel your passion in this area. This UN SDG, the 17 goals, and what you share with us makes so much sense. When UN SDG first came out, everyone was saying, everything is at a very high level because we are talking about, education for all, zero poverty, free education, free healthcare, etc. But the government alone can't do anything. But what I'm seeing on the ground is there is a huge disconnect between the macro and the micro, because policymakers are very disconnected to what is happening on the ground. And on the ground, people feel helpless without the government view to implement policies and changes to make it easy to practice. For example, recycling. We don't have a municipality that really, implement the rules and the fines and the punishment for people who do not recycle their waste. Yeah, for example. So all of these, it comes back to one thing: do not ask what the government can do for us, what we can do for all. So your last slide is really, really important. And I think this is something that, it is not all about science. It's really about the heart and the mind of what we want to do to have a better world for ourselves and for the next generation. Because climate change is real, it is here, and it spares nobody. we have experienced how bad it is. So the only issue now is that I think corporates are too preoccupied with ticking the boxes to meet the regulators' requirement on ESG targets and goals. So, again, that is a disconnect, like what Master Tersu said this morning, there is a disconnect from the needs by just ticking boxes. So thank you so much, and it's very, very participative. You invite everyone to type the numbers in the chat group. So any question? I can take one or two questions from the floor for Brother Johan. Thank you for spending so much time, preparing these slides. I know how much time it takes. Yeah. So I had lots, that I could take away, and actually at once I had the opportunity to talk to Jeffrey Sachs, who leads in the writing up of the UN SDG, and he is, as frustrated that because the progress is so slow, like in the slide that you have provided. Thank you. Yes, Brother Chan, yeah, go ahead to ask a question.
Thanks very much, Brother Johan. And to touch on the recent bit, which is not accounted for this SDG as compared to the Millennium Development Goals, which accounted for HIV, malaria, and all those. With this, the setback another 2 years for us, and the target of 2030 will go to 2033 or something because of this COVID, and it's also WHO, the World Health Organization, also part of the decision making in the SDG. Okay, thanks.
It was a little bit unclear, Sister Karpeng. Did you hear?
Yeah, I think the gist of it is the SDG goals linked to WHO. Given the recent, the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is there any link between, the SDG and the WHO?
So in my understanding, the entire UN, like all the UN organizations, are linked to the SDGs. But for and WHO is the World Health Organization, so especially when it comes to SDG 3 about good health and well-being, definitely WHO is a very important player. More details of exactly how this linkage is happening and so on, I don't have that information, but I can look it up.
Yeah, the other question is, will the target be pulled back, postponed to 3 more years because of the pandemic?
Was it the target? I have not seen any discussion about postponing the targets. I think the goals are set. It doesn't mean that they will be met, unfortunately. But I think the goals are set to provide inspiration and just a target for everything. So I haven't seen that discussion. It's very possible that it's been there, but I haven't seen it. Actually, the pandemic setback, not only the health goals, of course, but almost all the goals were set back because of the pandemic. But I think the right way of looking at it is that this just gives us further reason to accelerate the development. Unfortunately, as we can see, it's not really happening yet.
Yeah, if I may add, Brother, the 2030 targets are set, but comes 2030 is a measurement of how much have we met, and hence what will be the next set of actions after the millennium, the SDG, what will be next, because climate change will not go away, and it will accelerate if we don't do enough and don't do more. So comes 2030, it will be a sad place to be told that we are at least 70 or 80% of our targets, and the pandemic is one of those things that we have to accept when setting goals, because we will always be pushed back by a lot of these headwinds, and how well can we anticipate these headwinds or reduce the risk, just like, Master's vision, right? Purifying mind, bringing harmony to society, and, reducing disasters in the world. So that's my thought. Yeah, thank you.
Very good. And I'm sure that as we get close, just like in 2012, they started working on the next set of goals after the Millennium Goals. I'm sure that as we get close to the 2030 date, there will be, probably it's already started, the work on the next set of goals after the 2030 agenda. So yeah, that's also an important aspect, and also something that we do want to keep an eye on so that we can be part of that conversation when it happens. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, so for brothers and sisters online here, if there are any corporates who like to hear about Tzu Chi and how, just like Brother Johan said, how, Tzu Chi could help in the corporate's practice of the ESG or the SDG, do contact the entrepreneur group, Tzu Chi entrepreneur group. We do go out and do presentations and let people have better understanding of what we do and how we could help and provide the platform. Yeah, thank you so very much, Brother Johan. So in closing, I would like to invite all brothers and sisters to put their hands together and pay respect to Buddha and Master. Can we all rise, palms together? First bow, second bow, and third bow. And a bow to our beloved Abbot Masters who can join us here today. Thank you so very much, everybody, our brothers and sisters, for joining us this morning. So see you again next week, and we look forward to more sharing by Brother Johan and Master Tesu. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.